to the WagerTalk Podcast for the week ending December 24th. We've got a big show tonight. We've got William Bernanke stopping by from CG Analytics. He's going to join us, and we're going to talk about where the money's going in the college and NFL action this week. Find out how they made out last week at the books. We'll have another segment of Handicappers Corner with Ralph Michaels. Dave Cokin will be joining me later to break down some of this week's bowl games and some of the key NFL games. We will also have best bets at the end of the show. Mark Seidel is behind the controls. I'm your host, Marco D'Angelo. Before we get the party started, I want to have a quick programming note. We have next week no podcast, guys. We're going to take Christmas week off. It is let everybody spend time with the family, enjoy the holidays. It's week 17 of the NFL. We know how squirrely that week can actually be with who's playing, who's not playing, who cares, who doesn't give a shit. You know, week 17 in the NFL. So we'll take it off, but we'll be back the following week. So, without any further delay, let's bring in tonight's first guest. And Will, thank you for moving your schedule around, buddy. We normally tape on Thursday, but we moved it up to Wednesday tonight. We got this producer guy that, he's leaving town tonight and heading to go back and see family. And, well, you know what? He runs the control board, so I really don't got a choice. So we're here on Wednesday night, and we're going to talk some NFL and college. Before we get things started, Will, there's been 7 bowl games so far. How's the house done on these bowl games?
Well, so far, here's some of the good results we've had. Utah State and Tulane covering. We lost with Fresno and Georgia Southern coming in on the other end. The handle's been pretty low, but that's expected. It's the same thing every year. As the bowl games become more high profile and you have some ranked teams, bigger schools, bigger conferences, the handle will go up significantly, and we'll just see much more action.
Well, another crazy week in the NFL. A lot of photo finishes, as you'd like to look at. Is the Sunday started out with the NFL with Minnesota and Atlanta just crushing as, decent-sized favorites. I'm sure the start to the day wasn't that great, but how did it end up as things went out? Because I know the final 3 games on the card Sunday, the 2 late games, and then the Sunday night game, you guys had to be smiling.
Yeah, it comes to that Sunday night game. I think we mentioned it on the show last week about Foles being extremely undervalued here, considering the line move with him, being in there. It's certainly not. He's not. Wentz is not worth 3 or 4 points as opposed to Foles, especially a guy who just won the Super Bowl. Regardless of how he looked or whatever, you have to faith in this guy being in the lineup to replace him, and it paid off. And expect to be that great, but certainly you never really had much of a doubt in that game. But as far as how we did in the earlier games leading up to that. The winners for us were Bears, Lions, Niners, and, of course, the Eagles. Not as big as you'd probably thought, but the Eagles were certainly a great result. And some of the games we lost on were the Browns. That was on Saturday, and I think everyone saw the line move there. It was pretty self-explanatory. The Vikings coming in over the Dolphins took a lot of Viking money. Colts winning. We took a lot of Colt money from respected bettors, public bettors, all types. And the Titans beating the Giants was another tough result for us. So all in all, it was a choppy week. I guess that'd be the correct term there.
Well, going to Monday night, and no better way to end Monday night than have a game that came down to the entire game. It looked like it was going to be a Carolina cover without any problems. They were moving the ball well, never were not covering the spread. And then it got a little dicey at the end. It started whenever the Saints got their touchdown, made the game sit at 5, and then they were going to go for 2. And that's when things got interesting. They went for 2. Anybody that had Carolina was saying, please don't make it. And, of course, anybody that had the Saints wanted it because that line was sitting at 6. They throw an interception, and a guy runs it back for a 2-point conversion the other way and made it a 9-6 game. Sitting, for Carolina now to cover the game looked good until that drive late in the game. It was like too much time for the Saints to run it out. They couldn't kneel it out. So they just kept handing off, and lo and behold, they got closer to the end zone, and then fumble it through the end zone. The guy's at the 1 yard line trying to extend, and it goes out of his hands and through the end zone for a touchback. Was that a profitable touchback, or did it cost you money?
Expect the unexpected in the NFL, and this helps as well as far as unexpected things. You very rarely see a two-point conversion from the defense on a two-point play, attempt. I'm watching the game with my father, sees the guy running back. He thinks it's a touchdown. I'm like, Dad, it's a two-point, and he knows football. It's a two-point play for the defense, just like college. Oh, I've never seen that before. And it rarely happens in the NFL. College, if it happens on occasion. But as far as how we did on this, believe it or not, our biggest liability Monday night was on the under. So we had no chance, no matter what could have happened there, to actually have a profitable situation because that game was going way under no matter how many times, how many scores we had there late in the game. And it would have been worse if the Saints had covered, but not to the point where it would be drastically worse. The under was certainly our biggest liability.
Okay, so, basically you had some pretty good two-way action on that game. You weren't heavily one-sided one way or the other.
No.
But let me try to put it into perspective for our guys listening. On a play like that changes the outcome from one side to the winner to the other side, it wasn't a big decision as far as the house went net-wise, but how much money changed hands on a play like that? Because it's a Monday night football game. We know that's the heaviest bet game of the week. And it was a good Monday night game. You had, the Saints, everybody likes to watch, Carolina playing for their playoff lives. So even though it wasn't a big decision, whichever side came, obviously a lot of money changed pockets.
I would say it rivals the when Todd Gurley went down to the ground against the Packers. Similar scenario where the same amount of money exchanged hands. Upwards of, I would say, low six figures in that range.
Wow. That's, I know our life is, tough trying to pick the winners as it is. And, looking at you guys where, you just got to do what you got to do. You don't know who you're rooting for until game time. And then, you have the ebb and flows and the swings like that. And it's fun. That's what makes sports betting fun. And if you're in a sports book when that's going on, I happen to be home this week watching at home, but I can only imagine the moans and the groans of happy and not happy people. It's if you've never been to Vegas and experienced watching a game in a sports book, it's hilarious to watch, how many people with the different sides. But flip side of that is on the Sunday games, when I told you like the three late games, I know the Seattle-San Francisco game and the New England-Pittsburgh game, I was on the Strip watching it, one of your competitors, but I felt that I was the only person in the sports book that had a ticket on the Steelers and a ticket on the 49ers. Everybody in the sports book was rooting for the Patriots and Seahawks in those two games. So it's just funny how it varies from book to book.
Sure.
Going out, there's 7 bowl games from this Thursday through Saturday. Where's the sharp money at on those games, and what's the most public game that, we would say that, we don't want to call them squares, but your average player that's, making the plays?
Well, as far as what are public plays or lopsided, I just use lopsided here for this because it's somewhat early to be able to determine if these are going to remain this way. But 3 games that stick out: Marshall, Army, and La Tech, as far as where we're seeing some lopsided action, and that's reflected also in some of those line moves. And we're getting some respected money also on Marshall, FIU, Florida International, La Tech, and Army. Army's has seen some significant action. That line's, I think it got even crossed 5.
That's, interesting stuff with that one. The Florida International game, there's a possibility of some bad weather in that game. So that has something to do with looking towards the dog as well. Moving to the NFL this week, you've got a lot of situations this week where teams are jockeying for playoff situations, actually trying to make the playoffs, other teams trying to improve their seeding, and a lot of the teams with being eliminated or absolutely on the verge of it, they've got some injured quarterbacks that have been playing banged up. How hard is it for you guys when you're sitting there making these numbers, when you got teams like Green Bay and Rodgers, Detroit and Stafford, Carolina and Newton, and they have announced today that Newton's going to be a scratch. He's not going to go. When you set a number up, you're expecting to see somebody, and then all of a sudden you're not, or you set up a number trying to guess what they're going to do and maybe put a number somewhere in the middle. How do you guys do this with confidence?
Well, the first thing we'll start out with, Marco, is lowering the limits until we're 110% sure of who's in and who's out. And that's the first and foremost. So then really can't get hurt at that point. And then letting the early market kind of shape itself. So when it's all said and done, no one's going to really get ahead of us, if in case they have some inside information. And if they do happen to do that, we can certainly pinpoint it. And as well, the limits are so low, it's nothing that's really hurt us too much. It's in a sense you're paying money. It's almost like paying someone to watch for you. In a sense, they're betting. That bet is paying for you. Let's just use like a couple $100 as an example as the limit, and someone has some information, they put that down. That's not going to break you, and it's also giving you a heads up on something that you may not know already. So that's what we'll do right there. And also, having great communication here, work together, and if anybody has an update, as soon as it becomes available, we all share that information. So that's how we'll stay ahead of that.
Good stuff on that, Will. Now moving on to this week's NFL games. What's the game right now that's getting the most action from your sharp players, and where is the game that's getting the most action, period, public or, sharp?
Yeah, well, as far as some respected money, we've seen some on the Eagles. That line has crossed over, pick 'em. I thought I saw it hit 2. We're seeing some on the Bills, the Browns, and the Cardinals, believe it or not, considering how they've looked. A little surprising there, but they are catching, 2 touchdowns at home. And the biggest handle game, it's not even close right now, is the Browns. All Browns money, mostly public. In fact, it looks like it's all public, and that is our biggest handle by a good margin.
Wow, the Cleveland Browns. They're playing great football. There's no question about that. But, Will, did you, I know you've been doing this a while, but did you ever think you'd be laying up over a touchdown on the Browns?
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that, Marco. We had to look up here the last time the Browns were laying a touchdown. I actually had, off the top of my head, said I don't recall them ever laying a touchdown since they became expansion Browns. But they have. It was in the single digits, and I believe it was about when I think it was when Roman Cornell was the coach. So it's been a long time, and to put that in perspective, the Patriots are approaching 100 times to be a 7-point favorite or more in that same time span, since the Browns have been, in the league as the new Browns. So that's, that's hard to believe. But no, I certainly didn't think the Browns would be this, before the season. But then again, I didn't think they would fire the coach and have a guy come in who's done lack of a better word, heck of a job.
The combination of both guys being gone. Let's not forget Todd Haley in this.
Of course, yeah.
The Steeler offense is, much better this year. Todd Haley's gone. Coincidence, maybe. I don't know. And the minute he gets fired at Cleveland, Baker Mayfield runs off, 4 of his 5 best games. So something definitely to be considered there, and we'll see what happens if Greg Williams ends up getting the job, or if they go somewhere else. Keep hearing the Lincoln Riley talk. If they get him away from Oklahoma, that reunite him with Baker Mayfield would be, interesting and exciting for sure.
Yeah.
Will, thank you for stopping by. Normally we plug at this point the fact that you and Kelly do the 2-minute warning videos on Sunday. You know what? If we had to put up a number, even if we said, hey, we were going to do the 2-minute warning this week, I would have to put it up at a huge, huge number towards the no, maybe like probably minus 380, because she's going to be in Detroit on the weekend, going up, visiting our buddy Johnny Detroit in Bobby Liggs, another WagerTalk guy. They're going to go to the Detroit Lion game on Sunday. First of all, I don't know why anybody would want to travel to Detroit to see the Lions. That's first off. But the fact that they're going to be out Saturday night, they're going to a club, a gentleman's club. If anybody's in the Detroit area, you can meet and greet Kelly, Bobby, and Johnny at the Flight Club in Detroit. They will be I'm pretty sure, sauced for the kickoff on Sunday, and I understand that that's basically the only way you can watch a Detroit Lions game.
Yeah, I couldn't have said it better myself, but it sounds like a fun time.
All right. Hey, Will, you and your family have a great holiday. Merry Christmas. We won't be here next week. Hope to talk to you the week after. And from everybody at WagerTalk, Will, we appreciate you taking the time each week to share this stuff with our listeners. They just absolutely eat up this information.
Oh, always a pleasure, Marco, and happy holidays to you and your family. And tell everybody there at the whole WagerTalk family there happy holidays as well.
We will. All right, taking a quick break. When we come back, we're going to get our guy Ralph Michaels on the phone. We're going to talk some angles. He's got some great ones for the NFL this week, and we'll talk to Ralph next here on the WagerTalk Podcast.
It's Manic Monday, and that means every pick at WagerTalk.com is just $9. Get a play in any sport valued at up to $30 for just $9 each and every Monday at WagerTalk.com.
Welcome back to the WagerTalk Podcast. It's time for Handicappers Corner. And before we head into tonight's Handicappers Corner, and by the way, Ralph Michaels will be phoning in tonight, a little under the weather. You know, we've worked this guy to the bone with all these stats and everything, and we finally broke him down. So we are going to have him on the phone tonight in a moment. But before I bring him up, I want to tell you about a special deal at WagerTalk. And this is special. You know, every week I tell you about a special offer where we discount something, but, you know, you're still paying for something. We're going to give you something this week. It's Christmas. Santa Claus made an appearance. Make sure you watch the videos this week at WagerTalk. I think you're going to enjoy them. They were fun to do this week. And when Santa stopped by, he gave a special deal. If you have a current membership at either WagerTalk or Sports Memo, and even if you have one at both, you're going to get $20 put into your account Christmas morning. Now, you have to have a registered account before Christmas Day. When you wake up on Christmas morning, the $20 is already going to be sitting there. Santa's going to make his way around the country and drop $20 in everybody's account. You can use it however you want. Pick your favorite capper, buy a pick, use that $20 to do so. And that is just our way to say thank you to all of our loyal followers at both sites, Sports Memo and, of course, WagerTalk. All right, let's bring him in. He's the man. He's the numbers guy. He finds all of these angles for us. Ralph Michaels. Ralph, sorry we worked you to death and you're under the weather, but I appreciate you gutting through and coming on to the show with me tonight.
You know, fighting one of those head colds, feel better than I did yesterday, but appreciate you and Dave going through the best bets without me and going through this week's games. You know, Mark's working behind the counter as he always does, making us sound good. And Mark, just so you know, at videos today, I was said I was sick and I struggled through videos. And Marco said, "Well, make sure you come in to do the podcast." For Mark to go on vacation, it's like a roulette wheel. Will he get sick or not heading home? And Ralph would have gotten him sick. And Dave said, "No, Mark does a good job. Ralph, you stay home. We don't want to infect Mark with a cold." So thank Dave. Tell Marco to screw off. He was going to challenge your vacation, whether you'd be sick or not. So, you know, as we said, going through some of this week's NFL angles, I thought it'd be fun with the holidays just to go through some basic angles for this week. We want to preface this segment by saying, even though there's some great numbers here, you don't want to base a play just on a trend or an angle. If you like the side and it makes the play stronger, that's better. If you don't like the side and it makes you stay off a game, that's fine. And again, use it as part of your handicapping repertoire. But again, these angles sound good, but it's just one of the reasons you should look at and play a game. I'm going to start off with a simple one, and it's the Dallas Cowboys. The Dallas Cowboys, we know, have an inflated home edge, and when they're off a straight-up an ATS loss and returning home, they are 1-17 against the spread. An amazing number. You know, again, we know Dallas isn't a good home favorite, but an amazing 1-17 as a home favorite off a straight-up an ATS loss.
Ralph, it was just a couple years ago that the Dallas Cowboys actually, when I do a podcast with Gil Alexander every week for the NFL, and I had talked about this, they were the Northwestern. Remember how we talked about Northwestern this year, going back to the end of last year and all of this year until the final 2 games? If all you did was bet the dog blindly, you were just cashing tickets left and right. And the Cowboys were that same way for almost a 2-year run. And obviously seeing them at 1-17 as a home favorite would attest to that fact that just bet the underdog in the Dallas games. You've got one here moving to the list you sent me. Since 2006, Ralph, home favorites off a shutout, 21-12-2 against the spread. 63.6%. We know that's a big number. But if those home favorites are of 6 or more off the shutout, that goes to 14-3-1. That jumps up to 82.4%. That's an amazing stat.
You know, it is, and you're talking about a team playing well, whose defense obviously is playing well, and, those numbers seemed a little high to me, but it was certainly an eye-opener for me when I looked at those. You know, Marco, one we've talked about, and I'm just going to bring it back again. People may have said, hey, I have heard this on your show before, but they don't always remember when it applies, and it's just been solid. If you have a home dog of 8 or more, that's it. That's simple. A home dog of 8 or more. The under is 45-11, 80.4% to the under. So 4 out of every 5 games, the last 59 times we've had a home dog, it's gone under. You have a better team. They get a lead. They're happy to sit on a lead. You know, an underdog is a team that tries to do well. Maybe they know they're outmatched and they try to be a little more conservative to not make mistakes. Whatever the cases combined, it's been a great record.
Yeah, go in there and point out that the play that applies to this week would be the Rams-Arizona under. And just to backtrack to the stat that we talked just before that, there were 2 teams in that shutout role this week, and that is the Tennessee Titans laying the number over Washington on Saturday, and then on Sunday, Indianapolis, and they are playing some great football right now. Indianapolis over the New York Giants in that system.
Marco, I'm going to grab the next one. You may not be able to read my hieroglyphics.
Okay.
This one is post-week 9, so you're over halfway through the season. Your better teams are now in the playoff race. Your poor teams may be starting to play younger teams. If you have a road team and the lines are between the 3.5s, so you're playing a pretty equal team. You're either 3.5-point dog all the way to a 3.5-point favorite, and you haven't had any turnovers in the last 2 games. You're playing very good ball. An eye-popping 46-16-3, 74%, and that's Houston this week. So Houston's on the road. The lines are between the 3.5s. Houston has not had the turnover the last 2 weeks. And again, a very, very good-sized angle with 46 victories, 16 losses, and 3 pushes.
That's great stuff. Here's one's real simple. Seattle is a home dog, 11-1 against the spread. There's not much to think about there. And in those games, how about 9-4 straight up? 9-4 straight up as a home underdog. Pete Carroll gets the job done, and in that one against the spread loss, you got to go all the way back to 2011 against the Cincinnati Bengals. That's just amazing. And, of course, they are a small home dog this week against Kansas City. We know Kansas City's got the world to play for. This is a team that was just a week ago was the lock for the number 1 seed. And now they can fall all the way to number 5 in the playoffs with the wild card if they lose here and San Diego wins out. So interesting game.
One important thing for our listeners to pay attention to as well, people perceive, this is the public, I mean, these aren't astute gamblers, but people perceive need to equate to a team playing better. That's the farthest thing from the truth. The Vegas line is normally inflated if a team has need, but that team now has pressure. That team has anxiety. That team has a reason to worry about every play they make and every mistake they make. So a lot of times, I mean, I look to fade those teams that have need. You know, we see it those last couple weeks of the playoffs of the regular season often. The team that needs to win don't. And some team that wasn't expecting to make the playoffs slide up the rank and go ahead and make it. Here's another team angle that's simple. And, does it make sense? Yes. I mean, does it make to the sense of 0-18? No. And when you're looking at angles, it's important to note that if you have games that are 5-0 against the spread and they each cover by a point, well, those aren't very strong angles. A point either way, a basket in hoops, a home run in baseball could have changed that angle from a winner to a loser. But when you have an angle that has 18 situations and it fails to cover by 11.5 points per game, that is as strong as you get. The Miami Dolphins are 0-18 against the spread as a home favorite after a loss in which they never led. So they're off a game that they're disappointed. They were never in that game. They weren't challenged to a point where, okay, we can win this game. The next week, 0-18 against the spread in that role.
Yeah, that's an amazing stat for them. And, the Dolphins, too, after that big win over New England, going to Minnesota and just getting, steamrolled from start to finish and pretty much put their season to rest. But here's one for you. The Raiders 1-18 against the spread when the line is within 4 of a pick 'em, when they suffered at least 3 sacks in each of the last 2 weeks. Now, there's a lot of moving parts in that one, and, when you're looking at trends and stuff, you try to figure out, okay, does this make sense, or, is this a bunch of stuff put together? The Raiders at 1-18, of course, that's a great number that you don't want to just take for granted. But do you see a logic where you can wrap yourself around this one?
I do. I don't think there's that many moving parts. It's simply this. The offensive line is playing bad. You allowed 3 or more sacks in 2 straight games. And you're playing a team that is in your caliber. It's within 4 games of pick 'em. So, you have a team that it can go either way. You're playing a team that's playing to your level where you're within plus or minus 4, and your O-line's playing horrible. You look at the last couple weeks, Derek Carr got sacked 4 times against Pittsburgh, 5 times against Cincinnati. Their D-line's been horrible. They haven't gotten any sacks. So, to me, it does seem like a legitimate situation. Now, this Oakland game is so much different because it being the last home game and you have all the different scenarios. In fact, I did a video on this Oakland game, so make sure, there may be some things you don't think about if you're going to bet the Oakland Raiders. Make sure to listen to that video. So, to me, I think the angle makes some sense. Did I talk you into it where you rethought it or not?
No, because when you listen to later in the show, I'm going to be talking about this game, and I'm going to be on the Raiders. So
fair enough. Again, you're not going to base a play on this angle. You know what the offensive line is doing, but you are also basing a play probably on a historic situation, and that supersedes any type of angle that fits in. And lastly, it's one that goes with the Houston game. It's just, the Houston angle we gave earlier about turnovers in the last 2 games is a subset of this. And this doesn't matter if they're home or away. This doesn't matter if the line's between the 3.5, like the other Houston angle. This is just simply this. Teams that have 0 turnovers the last 3 games are 66.4%. Well, it doesn't get any easier. You are playing solid fundamental football. Your quarterback's not turning it over. You have no turnovers. You're just playing well. Those teams, 66.4%. Again, that's the same play on Houston, but you don't want to say you have 2 angles on Houston because one is a subset of the other. But, again, that just turns into common sense where you have a team playing well and you want to back that team.
And you talk about those turnovers with Houston. the last 7 games, they have 3 turnovers, Ralph, and all 3 of them came in one game. So that means the other 6 games, they have 0 turnovers in 6 games. That's insane. And that's why this is a team that had a 9-game winning streak rolling until they just had it snapped. And, oh, by the way, what game did they have it snapped? The game that they had the 3 turnovers.
Yeah, it's turnovers are the battle, and I'm a big believer. In an article we used to do for if those still publications, turnovers equals turnaround, and it holds true to the NFL and in college. And teams that benefit from turnovers one year are going to have a much better record. The Cleveland Browns are an example. They're +9. They were quite a bit higher until they were -5 the last few weeks. They were a team that forced many turnovers, didn't turn the ball over, won a couple of those close games. That'll regress the next year. So whenever you have a team that averages, when you're double-digit plus or minus turnovers, when you're looking at the next season, I automatically put a check, an arrow up or an arrow down, depending on their turnover count.
All right, Ralph, amazing stuff as always. I appreciate you gutting it out under the weather for us tonight. I won't see you here probably before the holidays. Have a great holiday, and let's try to, as soon as you're feeling better, let's have some holiday beverages to celebrate the season. I will talk to you next week, and I appreciate you stopping by and supplying us with these stats all year, Ralph. The guys, our listeners love you doing this stuff and you finding them, and I like whenever you do them to sit down here and tear them apart with you, the ones that make sense. And, and like you said, even if it doesn't put you on a winner, if it takes you off of a loser, saves you a loser, that's 1.1 unit you saved.
Awesome. You know what? I had a great time doing these pods this year. Thanks to all of our listeners. I really appreciate it. Thanks to all the fine comments. Follow me at Twitter at CalSportsLV. Thanks again for you and Dave for hacking out the rest of the show. Mark, Merry Christmas to you and the crew there, and have a very safe and happy holiday with your travels.
All right. That was Ralph Michaels. Appreciate him stopping by and sharing this information with us. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to head to college bowl action. Bowls are heating up. We're going to break them down. Dave and I got 4 or 5 of them we're going to take a look at, and then, of course, NFL later. And when we close out the show, of course, it will be Best Bet time. We'll be back here on the WagerTalk Podcast.
Every Tuesday, WagerTalk.com offers a best bet selection from its hottest handicapper. It's a great way to introduce yourself to WagerTalk.com with a big best bet winner for just $2 on $2 Tuesday.
Welcome back to the WagerTalk Podcast. We're going to head into college previews tonight, and we're going to take a look at the college game on Thursday. But before we do, I want to remind you tonight's college football segment is brought to you courtesy of uwager.eu. Get a 50% sign-up bonus using promo code WT50. That's WT50. When signing up, be sure to use the WagerTalk link. All right, let's jump into this week's college action. We're going to give Ralph the week off here with the previews, filling under the weather, but happy that he was able to join us for Handicappers Corner by phone. Dave, we're going to take a look at bowl game, the Gasparilla Bowl. Where do they get these names, for God's sake?
Gasparilla is some kind of a product, I guess.
But
I don't know what it is.
This is one where it's in Tampa.
Sounds like doesn't sarsaparilla? Yeah,
a drink? That's a great, like a root. It's like a root beer, sarsaparilla. I like that.
A sarsaparilla type drink that gives you gasparilla.
Oh, there you go. Oh,
yes,
my.
I don't know.
All right, we're going to fire our comedic crew and move on to.
It's the best thing I can come up with.
Yeah, it's tough, short notice there. Marshall at South Florida. Dave, most people are going to look at this and say, okay, well, Tampa, Florida.
It is at South Florida.
Yeah, this is a spot where it's obviously going to favor South Florida. But you know what? I've always been of the belief that when it comes to bowl games, unless it's one of the big bowl games where you're playing, like an Orange Bowl or something like that, and you get a Florida team, how exciting is it to you as a 20-year-old? Hey, you get to stay home, Dave. That's your reward for having a winning season. You get to stay home. And we're going to talk about another bowl game like that in a little bit. Down the stretch, South Florida, boy, they were atrocious. 5 straight losses.
Never any good. I mean, the 7-0 was a complete fraud. I mean, they struggled with Connecticut. They struggled with UMass. They were just never they were just fortunate to be 7-0. And then reality caught up. They can't play defense. The quarterback's sketchy. And actually they changed quarterbacks for the last game. They're just not that good. Marshall does deserve to be favored in this game. I would throw out the Virginia Tech game, which was a mistake by me. I've had a very good season in college football, but arguably one of the worst decisions I made all year was backing Marshall against Virginia Tech.
I did the same thing.
Well, it was good on the numbers.
Right.
But what I didn't factor in was they didn't even know the game was going to get played until Virginia Tech rallied to beat Virginia. Right. Because if that hadn't happened, that game would not have gotten played. It only got played because Virginia Tech then had a chance to become bowl eligible. So they played the game. Meanwhile, Marshall's coming off this thriller against Florida International. And now they're playing a game that meant nothing outside of, I kind of read in, well, they can knock off a Power 5 conference team. Obviously, that wasn't enough incentive. And they were just awful in that game. I would throw that game out when looking at this. And Marshall's probably the better football team. And, by the way, Doc Holliday in bowl games has been fantastic. I mean, really good. Now, the tough part is that I was hoping when I saw the matchup, it's like, boy, I hope they make South Florida the favorite here. But they didn't. Okay, the odds makers aren't stupid. They made the right team the favorite, and they priced it where, it doesn't figure to be a blowout. I can't be comfortable laying 3 with Marshall. That's the only side I'd play, but I didn't play it.
Well, I am on Marshall, Dave, and for the reasons all that you said there, I'll throw in a couple other things for you. The Marshall defense has held 5 out of its 8 conference opponents to 20 points or less. Only division champ Middle Tennessee State topped 30 points on them this year. They play good defense, and you talk about Doc Holliday. He wants to win this bowl game. He is a big recruiter in the state of Florida. He's got a bunch of Florida kids on the roster right now. And you go in, win a bowl game in Florida against another Florida team to boot. It's like a double win for him because you're beating a Florida team and you're doing it in the state of Florida. That helps his recruiting. I'm going to go ahead and go with Marshall. And the other thing we didn't talk about, Doc Holliday versus Charlie Strong. Big edge. I am not a Charlie Strong fan. In some of the decisions he made down the stretch and in that last game, we talked about it on the podcast before, his team quit on him in that last game. He gave up on that game, punted with 4th and 6.
Yep.
You in the fourth quarter down where you still had an opportunity, but he punted the ball away. It just was ridiculous. I can't back him. I'm on Marshall, and we'll move on to the next one. The Bahamas Bowl, you got Florida International against Toledo, and when we were talking in studio the other day, you said there might be some weather conditions down here in this one.
And that's affected both the side and the total in this game because the bettors are bombing the under, and they're playing the dog.
Florida International getting that money.
Here's the problem. I think that's a mistake. Not on the total. I can understand that, although it's been so aggressively adjusted by the books that now if you can't play the under now. As far as the side's concerned, and here's where I think, and I understand, as soon as the weather stuff came out with all the high winds, it's just going to be a lousy day in the Bahamas. That usually gets people interested in the underdog. But the matchup here, and I'll say this with an asterisk because asking a MAC team to do something good in the Bulls is really risky. It's just been awful. But if this is going to be a game where the ground game determines what happens, Toledo has a definite advantage. They're better offensively and defensively against the run than Florida International. There's also, both teams lost their bowl games last year, but for Toledo, it was really embarrassing. They got beat 34-0 by App State. And you know that they want to erase that memory. Well, the only way to do it is to win this bowl game. And finally, on my numbers, you can argue that the numbers a little bit, maybe not adjusted quite enough for some people that aren't playing for Toledo from earlier in the season who got hurt. But I still make Toledo more than the number here, considerably more than the number actually where it is now. So I'm on the Rockets in this one.
Yeah, I'm probably not going to get involved in this one, Dave, and the reasons being, if I did, I lean to Florida International, but I don't know that I can pull the trigger with them. But here's my problem, and it's a long-term condition. I just have a problem laying points with a MAC team in a bowl game.
Yeah.
That's the first bugaboo. And the second one, and I know you weren't a big fan of him at Tennessee, but Butch Davis has actually done a pretty good job with his team. They've been a money machine.
No, you're thinking of Butch Jones.
Oh, Butch Jones. Okay, all right, my bad. Well, Butch Davis, anyways, is doing a good.
Butch Davis, I've never had a problem with.
Yeah, he's done a good job here. 9-3 against the spread this year for them, and this is a team that getting points. They've been an ATM machine. I can see why the money's coming their way. The public likes the teams that reward them, and they have.
I don't think that's. I really think it's more weather than anything else. I think this line was going to sit where it sat, and I think the people, it's going to be lousy, so that people like to bet dogs in bad weather.
I agree with you there. No question about that. Let's move on to the next one, and we've got the Hawaii Bowl. And we talked about, okay, you had a great season, you become bowl eligible, and what do you get for it? Well, you get to stay at home. Now, I realize.
See, in South Florida's case, that might not be that might be a negative. But for Hawaii, it's kind of a big deal. They want to host their own bowl game.
They do. I will say this. I will give you one thing. I think they made a really good move moving this game away from it. Always used to be on Christmas Eve.
Yes.
Anytime you saw that game, did you ever know? Well, they always tried to keep the camera at field level and not give you a pan shot because they didn't want you to see that nobody was at the thing.
So this stadium that had no, everybody was dressed as empty seats.
Yeah, exactly. And so you really had no home field advantage, for them playing there. But they might get a few more fans there, being that it's a couple days before Christmas. But I look at this Louisiana Tech team, and I just think that they're a better team than this Hawaii team.
Better team.
Unless they get swept up in the beach, the girls, the luau's, all of the other things that go on in Hawaii, this is a team that I think they come to play, which I do think they will. I just think they're a mismatch for Hawaii.
Skip Holtz has done well in bowl games. So that's another plus. I think Rolovich is – I actually think Rolovich is one of the under-the-radar coaches of the year. How can I put this delicately? Hawaii stinks. I know that's not very delicate.
How did they get this many wins?
Rolovich did a phenomenal job with this team. They pulled off a couple of upsets. They're a one-dimensional team. They can't play defense, and yet they won 8 games. So anything's possible. But I agree with everything you said. If Louisiana Tech doesn't get caught up in what Hawaii has to offer, and we all know if you visited Hawaii, you know what I mean, okay? I mean, it's one of the great places on earth. If Hawaii takes care of business, they're going to win the football game. If they don't, they won't. You'll probably find out early whether they came to play or not. And if they did, then you're probably going to cash a ticket with Louisiana Tech.
Good point to look at in-game wagering on this one on Saturday night. Moving ahead, we'll jump past Christmas since guys in a programming note, we will not be here next week for the videos. We're going to give the guys the week off, enjoy Christmas week. So we'll have a bowl game the day after Christmas, actually, December 26th, the Quick Lane Bowl. And it's an interesting bowl game. We've got a couple things in play here. You got Minnesota at 6-6, and we've talked about Ralph Michaels has had that stat about teams that go to the bowls at 6-6 and they're an underdog, how they've been a good play because they want to come out with a winning season. Playing Georgia Tech at 7-5 with a little wrinkle of their own. Tell us about that wrinkle, the old win one for the Gipper.
Yeah, it's Paul Johnson's retirement game. He's going off, riding off into the sunset after a really good head coaching career. He's been coaching football for like 4 decades. And he's done a wonderful job at Georgia Tech, installing the option, getting the right players to run that offense. He's had a great career. I think he's well-liked by the players, and they're going to go all out to get him a win in his final game. Minnesota, you could make it 6-6-6, actually, because you get the 6 wins, 6 losses thing, and you've also got 6 players suspended for violating team rules. That was early on But it's kind of an indication right off the bat that maybe they're not as focused as you want. The other thing is that, and this is interesting because this is where power ratings can clash with style of play. On the power ratings, just on the power ratings, Minnesota getting in the neighborhood of a touchdown now is a good bet, okay? I mean, Georgia Tech is not 7 points better than Minnesota on a neutral field. But, or in the words of Stephen A. Smith, however, they don't match up well with teams that really run the ball. And if you look at the losses this year for this Minnesota team, they got run over in those games by Illinois, Maryland. These are teams that, particularly Illinois, that was a running team.
They lost by 29 to Maryland and 24 to Illinois.
Yep.
I can't bet any team that lost by that many points to those two teams.
So now they're going to face nothing but runs. Options not that easy to prepare for. They really haven't seen anything like it. I just think there's too much on the Georgia Tech side in terms of the motivation and the matchup itself. And the Yellow Jackets are in the checkmark column for me.
I agree with you on that. You know, you can say one of the things about preparing for the option during the regular season, you generally have 1 week to do it. And maybe if you had a bye week before it, that gives you an advantage. You do have extra time in the bowl games.
But you still have to have a scout team that knows how to run that type of offense themselves for the defense to prepare for it.
Exactly.
And you can't spend that much. All you can do, I guess, is take your scout team and have them run it. But I don't know how effective is a scout team in masquerading as a gimmick offense. Those players aren't good enough to start anyway.
Right.
You're certainly not going to have your starters out there practicing as an option team because they've got their own offense to worry about. So you got more time, but I don't know if it's more effective. And the thing is, if you don't know how to play assignment defense, you can't defend the option. And Minnesota just, I don't know, they know how to do that.
And before we wrap this game up, give you a tip. I agree with you on the Georgia Tech side. Give you a little tip for next year out of the gate. The new coach coming in, I think they hired a Temple coach. Yep. He has already said they're scrapping the option. So remember, these are going to be that first year. You've got guys that were recruited strictly to run this type of offense. Now you're going to have them running a different offense next year. He's going to have some of his own people coming in there, but they're not going to be the impact players, as first-year players coming in, unless they go the junior college route and get some JC transfers in her.
He's got why they went there, I don't know, but Johnson's he's actually got some talent at wide receiver. And those guys are probably thrilled to be going into a more probably a spread offense.
A lot of it, and I'm glad you did that because I had that in my notes and I forgot to say that. With the extra prep time with these option teams, everybody is so geared about preparing to stop the option. It gives the option team a chance to put a couple trick plays in there off of the option.
And whatever's left in Johnson's playbook, it's getting used in this game.
And the thing about option teams, whenever they do run a pass play and it works, it's generally for a touchdown. Yeah. Okay? It's going to be at least a 40-yard gain. There's going to be an explosive play or a touchdown.
It's the fourth down play on the Carolina-New Orleans game.
No.
Carolina did almost nothing else right in that football game. But that was a beautifully executed play, and it worked for a touchdown.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll look at that one. And, guys, we're going to step out for a quick break. When we come back, we're going to take a look at the NFL. We've got a very good card this week in the NFL. That'll be up next here on the WagerTalk Podcast. Welcome back to the WagerTalk Podcast. We're going to head into the NFL. And, Dave, some interesting games this week. Jockeying a position, guys still trying to find a way into the playoffs. And one of the more intriguing games, and this one is one of the Saturday night games, I'm excited to see this one. We talked about this one on videos today. Teddy Covers and a special guest did this one. I just got to tell you got to watch the videos this week. You got to check it out. And this was very animated video between Teddy and the special guest. I'll just say that Teddy might be looking at a lump of coal after that video. But let's talk Baltimore and the L.A. Chargers. Dave, you and I have talked a couple times when we do the Monday morning quarterback with Chuck Esposito from Stations Casino. And every week it's the same thing when we talk about Baltimore. What are they going to do when they really face a defense, and what are they going to do when they fall behind? So far, they've been able to avoid that. How do they go to L.A. and face the Chargers?
Well, they get ahead. And if they do that, they can keep on running what they're running. And Lamar Jackson's doing a great job. Yeah, I know he doesn't throw the ball well. We knew that already. But he is becoming a guy who, right now, you can't stop him on offense. I mean, I don't care how you get down the field, as long as you get down the field. And right now, nobody's figured out a way to really shut them down to any great extent. But they could be running into a buzzsaw here, and it's a huge game for the Chargers. It's a huge game for Baltimore as well. Obviously, the Ravens need this win for their playoff hopes. But the Chargers also know, and normally I don't put much into the seeding in playoffs. I mean, if you're in the playoffs, you figure you're happy to be there, and that's it. But there's a big difference between finishing number 5 and number 1. And if the Chargers can win this game, they do put a lot of pressure on Kansas City to win their game on Sunday at Seattle. And that's going to be a tough game for the Kansas City Chiefs, I can tell you that, because Seattle's going to be fired up for that game, and the Chiefs' defense is not very good. And I think Seattle's got a real chance in that game. This game's real tough for me because I don't want to lay points into this Ravens defense right now. But I don't want to go against the Chargers, who are arguably playing the best football in the National Football League right now. Anthony Lynn has got this team peaking at the right time, and I don't really want to go against that.
Dave, they're 20-6 straight up the last 26 games. That's impressive.
Yep. Going
back to last year, and think about some of those 6 losses, Dave.
Oh, close games.
Close games. They've played New England last year, Kansas City this year. Earlier in the season, the losses have come to good teams. They had a couple games with kicking issues. We know that's been a problem with the Chargers over the years. But here's what I just can't wrap myself around: the Baltimore Ravens, Lamar Jackson, as you said, the end result, however it happens, you look at the scoreboard. The scoreboard tells the story. They're 4-1 with them, 3-2 against the spread,
and they're better with him than we are with Flacco. It's
the team has a chemistry going right now. He's got more rush attempts, 114, than he's got pass completions, 73. Think about that for a second.
They've adjusted their offense for the guy who's running it. So props to John Harbaugh and the assistant coaching staff there at Baltimore. They haven't been insistent on running the type of offense they were running with the wrong personnel, which too many coaches do. They've adjusted their offense to suit Lamar Jackson, and it's worked.
It has worked. Situational-wise, Dave, you've got Baltimore. It's got to go from the East Coast to the West Coast on a short week. They are playing on a Saturday. And the Chargers get that extra day because they played on Thursday night. This is one of those ones, I don't know that it makes the card, but I think this is the one where we really find out where the Ravens are. And I want to see if they fall behind one time by 2 scores, what they do. The defense has kept them in a position that they haven't had to have him throw the ball to bring them back. We'll see what happens if they do. I'll tell you what, right now, as a Steeler fan, I'm scared to death of the Ravens getting in there. I said at the beginning of the season the Ravens were going to win the division. I didn't think we would be looking at it with Lamar Jackson running the show the last 6-7 weeks of the season. But right now, you get a hot defense, and we say it, come playoff time, you give me all those fancy offenses, you give me the good defense that can make the difference in the playoffs. Moving to Sunday, and this is a situational nightmare of a game.
For both teams.
We've got the Chicago Bears at the San Francisco 49ers.
Right.
We've got Chicago. We talked about it last week, that last week was supposed to be their flat game on paper because they had their statement game, that Sunday night win over the Rams. But we said
not against Green Bay, though.
But it's Green Bay. They're going to have that, one more. So now this is the natural flat spot, going on the road, playing the 49ers.
Even though the game still has meaning to them. Because if the Rams, I know the Rams are big favorites in their last two games, but if the Rams blow one of those games and Chicago wins out, the Bears get the number 2 seed.
Yeah.
And also Chicago's still got to sweat Dallas.
Right.
So it is a flat spot for them. But
there's meaning. There's big meaning
yeah.
now. I think there's more meaning because of the Rams losing last week and give them the shot of number 2.
They have a chance.
If they get a that second round, if they're got that game at home,
it's huge.
It's big for them. Big.
Now, here's the other thing. It's also a potential flat spot for the 49ers. Because listen, Shanahan's doing a terrific job with this team, considering the injuries they had, which just crushed this team before the season even got started. I know Garoppolo's was after the season started, but they already had a lot of injuries going in, and that was just the culminate, the finishing touch, if you will. So the fact they've hung in and gotten better as the season's gone along, in fact, is a plus. But they're coming off this overtime thriller against a divisional rival, and they've got the Rams on deck. If the 49ers are going to have a dead spot in their last couple of games, this is it. So I think this is a really tough game to read. And it's a game, my number on it says Chicago, but I just dismissed the number and said, I'm not playing this game. This is a really good game to stay away from as far as I can tell.
Well, here's where I came up with the tiebreaker for me to get me on the side. And Mullins, as good as he's played, and he's played much better at home, the fact of the matter is, and they are 4-3 at home this year, the 49ers. The problem with that 4-3 is the 4 wins came against Detroit, Oakland, Denver, and Seattle last week in a colossal flat spot for Seattle last week. They haven't faced a defense of this quality all year. Mullins, so he's going to really be tested.
Right. He could make mistakes against this offense.
Run the football well the last 2 weeks. They're not going to run the football well against this Bears defense if the Bears come with any, if they have any urgency in this game and show up. I have to lean to the Chicago Bears. This is a team I just think they're on a mission. Yeah, Trubisky might have that flat game, but I just don't see this defense having a flat game. They're on pace to be, like those great Bear defenses in the back. I mean, they're not to that degree, but they're as important to this edition than the Bears defense was back then. Oh, yeah,
because this offense really isn't very good.
No, and they're the team, they're the leader of this one, and that's what I got to look at. I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to take Chicago here. I'll lay the points with them. I got them winning 24-16. This is the one as we wrap it up, Dave. This is the one that's got all of the intrigue to me.
Oh, this is fun.
Kansas City at Seattle. You've got Kansas City that we talked about it how many times. This is a team that was a lock for the number 1 seed. They could be the wild card.
They could end up the 5. They could end up having to travel for their first game. They could end up at Pittsburgh. Well, that's the way it goes. I mean, that's I don't have a problem with it. I know some people, this is why you've got to change the play. No, you don't. Because if you change the playoff seeding, you wouldn't have this kind of excitement and intrigue involving a game like this. It'd be like, okay, so we lose this game. Big deal. It'll be second instead of first, which not much of a difference there. So that's why I like things the way this is a big game. Now, here's what happens, though it might not be a big game. Because if the Chargers get upset on Saturday, Kansas City can kind of relax here. And I think that's one more
because
thing.
They got Oakland to close the season.
Which they're just going to assume is going to be a win. In Seattle, meanwhile, boy, this is a live home dog. They're playing good football. Throughout last week's game was a horrible spot for them. They still managed to get the game into overtime, so it wasn't that bad a performance when you kind of add things up. But they're looking good. Carroll's going to play with a lot of confidence. They still want to make sure they get in the playoffs, okay? I think this is a candidate to tease. If you're afraid of taking Kansas City or going against Kansas City in a short price where you probably have to win the game outright with Seattle, this is one where it's an idea. It's in that math
2.5 math.
2.5, so it fits on the math in the teaser prop. You could take this with like Dallas, okay, and create a good teaser there where you go through both the key numbers of 3 and 7, one with a favorite, one with a dog. And I don't think Kansas City's blowing Seattle out on this home field either. So that's where I'm looking at this one more than a straight bet. But even from a straight bet standpoint, I'd probably lean Seahawks.
Yep. My closing line on this game is lean to Seattle, but I will have Seattle in all of my teasers on Sunday because plus 8.5 because they generally don't get blown out. This is a team, especially on this field. And I got to tell you, Dave, if the Chargers win on Saturday, and I think they have the benefit of playing Saturday because it puts more pressure, I think, on Kansas City that they have to win now.
I want the listen. Now here's the funny thing. It sounds weird to say it.
Sounds ass backwards, but it's not. But it's not.
I actually don't believe it. This is why I think Seattle's the right way to play here, particularly in the teaser, because you've got two things that can happen. One is the Chargers blow the game, and Kansas City is just in mail-it-in mode on Sunday night. The second is that they're the team with all the pressure on them.
Yep.
Neither is ideal. So to me, Seattle...
Play to win, you play to not lose instead of play to win. You
Sure.
start to get tight. And let's not forget, it's still Andy Reid on the sidelines.
Well, and it's still...
He's played more open this year, but boy, did we see it again. Start to rear its head at the end of the game last week. Let the Chargers get back in there. And, everything had to go right for the Chargers at the end of that game. And they got it.
And the Chiefs' defense still sucks. Okay, it's a lousy defense. And that 2-point conversion was the Chiefs' defensive season in microcosm where the guy's completely wide open. This defense is going to have problems in this game with Seattle.
Dave, you could have threw that 2-point conversion.
I can't. You've seen me attempt to make crumpled
true.
up paper into the wastebasket in the other studio.
About 3 feet away. Yeah, you're right.
So,
okay.
no.
Yeah, let's scratch that.
Yeah, nice try, but that's just not
But he
true.
was that open.
No, all I know is they're facing their defense has not shut down a good quarterback, and they're facing a good quarterback with a good running game here. I mean, I think Seattle's winning the game myself.
Kansas City, it's a shame and to do what they've done this year and everything they've done and to end up coming out. And I'll tell you what, Dave, if the Chargers do win on Saturday and Patrick Mahomes goes into Kansas City and has a big game and gets the win and they end up securing the AFC West, I know the sentiment is this. Drew Brees is the MVP if you're going to include body of work over the career. If it's just this season, to me, Mahomes is far and away the winner.
No question. Mahomes is the player of the year in the NFL.
But
I also think that Brees
is going to get that sentimental vote.
Unless the Chiefs blow the number 1 seed, I think Brees is going to be the MVP.
All right, good stuff. So you got leans from both Dave and I on Seattle, and you got big leans on that teaser up to 8.5. And we're going to step out for our final break of the night. When we come back, you're going to get a best bet from Dave and myself. See if we can keep these best bets rolling along. That's up next here on the WagerTalk Podcast. All right, welcome back to the final segment. We're going to have a couple best bets here. Dave's going to have one. I'm going to have one. Just want to remind all of our listeners a couple things. First, a programming note. We're going to be off next week. No podcast next week. We're taking a week off. We'll be back the following week with action for you. Going to enjoy the Christmas week here and a lot of bowl action, a lot of food, a lot of drink. Just kind of relax for a few days.
So this is the last podcast of 2018.
Basically, yes. That's what you're talking. Exactly.
Very
and
nostalgic, not nostalgic one. I was sentimental.
There you go. You know, Dave,
tell how worked up I am about this.
You've been here obviously a lot longer than me. I've been in Vegas 10 years.
I have been in here.
I have not spent a New Year's Eve actually on the Strip yet.
I did.
I want to do it. I want to do it once to say I did it, but I did it the first.
Not me. I'm not sure it was the first year I was here, but I've been here for a long time, so it was basically all locals on the Strip anyway. It was no big deal.
Not what it is now.
Oh no, it's crazy.
I mean, it's what 300,000 people they get. Yeah. You know, it's ridiculous.
I will not be one of them. Why are you going to the Strip this year?
No, I said it's on my bucket list. I'm not there yet, but I want to do it. I want to do it once. I also want to give you guys a special gift for Christmas. You know, normally in this segment we would tell you about a special offer. but where we're trying to sell you something. I'm not selling you anything today. If you are a registered member at either WagerTalk or Sports Memo, Christmas morning, you're going to find $20. Santa's going to make a visit and put $20 in your account. You can do whatever you want with it. Use it on any capper. If you're not a member yet, register before Christmas morning, because if you register by the 24th, when you wake up the 25th, you'll have $20 in your account. So that's our Christmas present to you from the gang at WagerTalk and Sports Memo. Dave, you've got a college bowl game. We actually talked about this one. Tell us a little bit about it.
Wish I was there in person.
We can still time. We're off. Yeah. So, we have nothing after Thursday.
It's true.
Or Friday. You got a radio show Friday. You got to fly out right away Friday.
I would have to, it'd be kind of tight.
It'd be easier for us to go to La Jolla.
Yes, which is also nice.
Yeah.
But Hawaii is a wonderful place. However, I do not think the home team will win the Hawaii Bowl. Look, I as expressed earlier when we were talking about the game and analyzing it, there's always the danger Louisiana Tech pulls a sleepwalk here and just gets wrapped up in a vacation at the end of the season rather than a football game. But you do have a coach who at least has, to this point, has done very well in bowl games. He's been able to prepare his team for the game with the extra time off. And on paper, Louisiana Tech is better at everything than Hawaii. So at the number, I will take Louisiana Tech. We'll call it +1. Actually,
I think it's going to be they're going to be favored.
I think they're going to be
-1.
I sold this game and posted it fairly early at +1.5 or 2 on WagerTalk, so it is a premium play for me. And I will take the Bulldogs of Louisiana Tech.
I agree with you, Dave. I'm going to go to Christmas Eve. Going to give you Monday night football play. And normally you and I would be doing a show on Monday, and I would be breaking the Monday night game down into marquee matchups. So we're not going to have a radio show, so I'll go ahead and do it here for you. And we're going to break down this Raider game with the Denver Broncos. And I'm going to start with Vance Joseph.
Oh, boy.
It's not going to be a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. You're a dead man walking. I'm sorry, unless something happens and the sky's open and the gods make everything fall right and somehow you sneak into the playoffs, it ain't happening for you. You're done. By the time this game kicks off on Monday, Dave, they could already be eliminated. That's the thing. Like right now, they're mathematically still alive. Right. Come Monday, they might not even be mathematically alive.
So he could be, and everybody knows he's going to get canned. So this could be a real lame duck situation.
And for the Oakland Raiders, let's be realistic about it, okay? All of the politics and, not getting the new stadium and everything else, and the fans being disappointed and everything, it's still their Raider team for, one more year, but they're not going to play there next year.
I don't know if they are or not, but I think a lot of people are looking at this as the last home game for the Raiders in Oakland, and it might well be.
And they're going to treat it that way. And that's no coincidence, in my opinion, that this ended up being scheduled as the Monday night game, okay? You got John Gruden on Monday Night Football. The team has shown some spark in the last few weeks. Throw out last week's game. They were coming off back-to-back games against Kansas City and Pittsburgh and pulled the upset against Pittsburgh, then had to travel cross-country to play the Bengals. Yeah, really. I was all over the Bengals as a situational play. There was a no-show game for the Raiders, and they played like a no-show.
They can't afford the no-show.
Okay. They're going to show. That was a sandwich game to this one for the Monday night game. And you know what? The Raiders want to give that little spark of, hey, we got something going. Carr's put up some numbers in the last few weeks.
Much better the last few weeks.
In Denver, that defense is not what it used to be. I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to go with Oakland. I think you're going to see them pull all the stops out. Can you imagine the Coliseum, a Monday night, partying all day, the Black Hole in Oakland, if it is the last road game, and whatever side you're on, the city not getting them a stadium or not, it's still your team. They're going to go out and support them for the last game, in my opinion. I think it's just one of those, you talk about a perfect storm situation. Dead man walking, team, final home game, playing better, national audience. You've had a stinker of a season. Why not go out on a high note? I like the Raiders, and if they get the job done, you can depending on the situation the next week, they could be the absolute no-show next week. But that number's going to be huge if Kansas City needs it. But for this week, I'll go ahead and take the Oakland Raiders. And this is another one, Dave. We talked about Seattle in using the teaser. This is a game you got to look at teasing the Raiders is the home number because they are the number. It's a lower total, and it's a number that goes through all the key numbers. In Denver, if you're going to do the tease, do it now because if the game means nothing to Denver, I think you're going to see a big drop on the price come Monday from that 2.5 down to maybe 1 or even get the pick if enough money comes on the Raiders. Hey, guys, that's going to wrap up tonight's show. Want to thank our guest tonight, William Bernanke, coming in, talking to us about where the money's at. Ralph phoning in. He's under the weather tonight, but what a trooper. He phones in and gives us the angles for this weekend. Of course, my partner in crime in the studio, Dave Cokin. Big shout out to Johnny Detroit. He's the guy who gets this podcast put out to everybody so that you guys can listen to it. We're on iTunes, Spotify, Google Play, and iHeartRadio. And, of course, Mark Seidel makes sure we sound good running the control board. And last but not least, you guys are loyal listeners. We truly appreciate you taking the time to listen to us each week. We appreciate that. Have a happy holidays. Merry Christmas to everybody. Don't forget, check your account. If you have a membership at WagerTalk, you're going to get a free $20. And I'm Marco D'Angelo. Until 2 weeks, not next week, 2 weeks, let's cash some tickets.